Well, let me
because
start. Let me start recording and introduce everyone, okay? And we'll come to you in a second. Welcome, everyone. I am Justin Matthew Perny, co-founder of White Collar Advice. Super excited to see all of you and people on our team here. I see some people I spoke with over the weekend joining the call. The goal is only to provide value, to help, to educate, to inform. We have former clients here. It appears I may have to immediately start muting people. This could be a record 30 seconds in. I'll do it. I don't want to. Please stay muted while we speak as best you possibly can. There it happened. I just muted you. Let's have a little fun. We're talking prison after all, but we're not getting the death penalty here. We're going to be okay. So really excited to have you here. The goal is to teach to the extent that we can give away as much as we can through Prison Professors nonprofit. We do. Some people, of course, choose to retain our team, but whether you use us or work through the free resources we give away, we want to help you. Part of what we're going to do today is talk about the transition to the halfway house and ways that you can influence that process. I see old client physician Andy on the call. He's been home, he said, since May. In a minute, he can give us a couple of minutes summary about his transition from prison and what's happened. But what I'm going to do is, in part of this interview, it's very self-promoting because I'm going to play 3 YouTube short videos I filmed in the last week, but they're 60 seconds and I think they're going to be appropriate. So bear with me. And then I'm going to share some insights from John Gustin. This is an interview we did. Scotty Carper, it's my bad, dude. I need to make you a co-host in the future because we got a lot of people that want to join, but I'm letting them in right now. That's my bad. So I'm going to play some insights from John Gustin, who ran the halfway house of the BOP for 25 years. And Friday night, I filmed a live YouTube video that articulated lessons I had learned upon my 15 years of release from prison. And I closed with something that surprised me when I came home, but no longer surprises me now. When I came home from prison, I presumed if people would see a path to prepare, they would do it. Now it's hit me 15 years later. Some people do, some don't. It's like we know to eat well, some of us don't. We know not to drink a lot, some of us do, including me at times. Just because we know what to do, we don't do it. And that's the same thing that happens with these interviews that we've done with judges. Like someone watching this right now probably has a sentencing hearing upcoming. There's something a judge told them to do, and for whatever reason, they didn't do it. They think they're different. Their lawyer said it doesn't matter. There's something compelling you not to follow a best practices approach. Can't help you. Someone in our community just got sentenced. They retained you shortly before that sentence, but they were able to build into an allocution statement of what they would do post-sentencing. And you're going to hear that from John Gustin when I play a portion of his video today. Let me say it again. Before he got sentenced, he articulated through his allocution what he was going to say at sentencing that articulated what he would do in the weeks, months, and years ahead to influence his judge, because it's federal judges that tell us they expect to hear something with very little follow through. So even if you've yet to be sentenced, it is essential you build in what will happen after you get sentenced. Then, of course, if you don't follow through on it, don't do it. You'll look dumb. But if you are actually going to follow through on it, if you've yet to be sentenced, you've got to express to your judge what those post-sentence plans are, presuming you want more liberty to get out of prison earlier and all that good stuff that comes with it. Now, Andy, welcome to our community, or welcome back. Before I get into John Gustin and some of these insights, give us a couple of minutes shtick on how long you've been home and what that experience was like through Leavenworth.
Yeah, so I was before I went to Leavenworth, which was in May of last year. I listened in on these phone calls, and I have to say, in retrospect, they really helped make my time there a lot better. I just the whole experience of getting sentenced and thinking about having to spend some time in prison, whether it's 6 months or 6 years, it's really overwhelming in a lot of ways. So that's why I signed in today. I was there for 10 months, and then at the end of February of this year, I went from Leavenworth camp to a halfway house in Iowa. I was told at camp that I would be at the halfway house for 2 or 3 days, get oriented, and then go home on home confinement. So that's what my family and I were expecting. Then I get there and I'm told, no, you're going to be here for 6 months. And I have to say that was very painful to hear. So you know, we're all pretty powerless, you know, when dealing with the BOP. And I know every halfway house is different. In Iowa, the place that I was at, it's really run by the state, and the BOP contracts with them. So most of the people there were actually had been in state prison. I don't know why, but a lot of the guys there were there for sexual offenses. It was a very different crowd than what was at camp, which did not include anyone that was in for that.
So let me jump in and ask a question, because we're going to hear some of this from John Gustin. I'm going to jump to the 7-minute portion of his interview. How long after were you in prison did you learn that you would be going to the halfway house?
So I would say that it was in August or September of 2023.
Roughly how many months?
So as I said, I was at camp for 10 months. I would say 4 or 5 months into that, I found out that I could get to a halfway house that winter, which was the 10-month mark.
And then once you got to the halfway house and they said you might be there a few days, but it could be longer, how long did you end up staying at the halfway house?
Well, he told me it would be 6 months. It ended up being 3.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So throughout this interview, this webinar, I'd love for you to chime in when appropriate. Just raise your hand and we'll get inside. Are you working? How long did it take for them to approve your job? Well, let me ask you, are you working?
I was until just recently. I got a job at Lowe's Garden Center, and I'm glad I did that.
Got it. Congratulations on working. I know it's not easy, but to confirm, you are not yet done. You're still working within you're still in the BOP, correct?
That's right. Yep.
Okay, so what he mentioned, I presume once he's done as a physician with his skill set, he might not be working there forever, but you'll learn there could be 2 sets of job. One job in the halfway house to finish your time with the Bureau of Prisons. Scotty Carper did that, I think, with our team, actually. Some people who volunteer with our nonprofit, before they even get sentenced, are able to build a record of volunteering. Because of that, in the halfway house, many people like Scott Laney, he used to be on our team, Melinda could have done it, are able to volunteer for us, get that approved as their job in the halfway house. Wonderful opportunity for some of you have yet to be even sentenced, or if you've been sentenced, you haven't gone to prison, it's an opportunity to get affiliated. So there's one job. I picked up phones in the halfway house for 3 months. When I was free on supervision, I was free to do essentially what I wanted because my probation officer approved the job. I think Joseph might have also volunteered and done some work for us while he was in the halfway house and finishing up his year and a day sentence. So this is all preparations you can put in place right now. Brandon, thank you for the comment. You finished the halfway house home confinement this morning. Feel free to chime in and raise your hand if you have any insights to offer. What I was hoping to do now is, if you can see my screen, can you confirm that you can see my screen, Scotty, everyone? Okay. So this is John Gustin, who ran halfway houses and home confinement for like 25 years. Okay, this is the dude that had a lot of power. In fact, I actually think John was the one that sent Michael Cohen back to prison when he got out of prison for doing media interviews. So he had a lot of influence with the BOP, and we have some BOP executives or former staff on our team. We interviewed John. I brought him on a few other times, and I'm like, nothing's changed. Rather than bring him back on live, you can hear from me and him. So this first question, and this will lead into what I want to discuss next. Let's hear Michael's question, and then we will discuss it.
The residential reentry manager.
So if I'm going into the system and I want to qualify at the earliest possible time, who are the stakeholders that are going to be reviewing my particular case? What they're in the Bureau of Prisons? Is it just the case manager, or is there somebody else that's assessing me?
Yeah, so generally within about 18 months prior to your anticipated placement in the community, the case manager is doing a team of you, normally scheduled teams every 6 months, every year, depending on where you're at. They're doing a team and they're recommending you for placement in our city. And it's incumbent upon the justice involved individual, when they're being reviewed, to present to that case manager, present to that counselor or that member of the unit team what their reentry plan involves. You know, prior to my incarceration, I was doing this. When I get out of incarceration, this is what I plan to do. This is the assistance I need in doing that. I've got a place to live or I don't have a place to live. This is who I'm going to be residing with. This is the type of employment I'm going to be seeking, and here's my plan. And you have to be very realistic about that plan. And you have to understand that if you're a lawyer, you're probably not going to go back out and start practicing law tomorrow. You know, if you're a doctor, you're probably not going to go out and start practicing doctor. But you have to start somewhere. So you really need to, and Michael, this is one of the reasons why I like what you do so well, is the planning during your entire period of incarceration. From day one, you should be planning for what are you going to do when you get out? And, you know, what does that life look like and what tools do you need to do that? And I think that's critically important that you present that in writing to your case manager every time you go into a meeting with the case manager where you're discussing your plan for incarceration. What program should you attend? Because it should be driven by what your goals are and what the individual goals are of the justice involved individual, because otherwise it's going to be the goals of that case manager. And that's really not beneficial to either party, because then you don't have a vested interest in doing those programs or seeing what you need on the outside. And that's probably the biggest thing I would tell people is do your own time. Come up with your own plan. What are you going to do for reentry? Don't let other folks tell you what your plan is. Really start thinking about realistically, what is my life going to look like when I get out of prison or when I start this transitional journey, and what do I need to get there?
Okay, so much to unpack there coming from a guy who ran it for 25 years. So let's break down a few things that he said here. Someone recently reached out, asked me to take a look at their release plan, and I was grateful, strategic plan, I was grateful they shared it. And I said, you cannot give this to your judge at sentencing. Now, I love the idea of even getting the release plan to your judge at sentencing because it shows what you'll do moving forward. And I said, you cannot get this. And essentially he articulated that he wanted to like start a substance abuse center and help other addicts. And I'm like, dude, based on you are an addict. You have been unable to convey to the court that you are healthy, clean, and free. Your judge is going to crush you. You cannot express that message. He did. And guess what the judge said at sentencing? Exactly what Judge Bennett told Michael Santos in an interview. Don't give me happy talk or make believe. You can't tell me you're going to help other people if you haven't helped yourself. Please, if you're going to create it on your own, make sure it's realistic. Had I come home from prison and told my probation officer, I'm going to work with people going to prison without a record, he would have laughed at me. The record had to be built over a sustained period of time. I'm begging you, if you're going to create it on your own, create it with appropriate messaging. And I know a federal judge in Fort Worth said to me, if the message today is, I have no idea what I'm going to freaking do because I've only been a doctor or lawyer or business guy, I have no idea how I'm going to figure it out. That is a more honest, authentic message than giving me utter nonsense, which is what so many defendants do. So it is essential that you are honest. Now, it is a good idea to lay out a vision, what you will do moving forward, so that people who have yet to be sentenced, it probably makes sense to articulate that vision to a judge. Then, as we're going to get into in a few minutes, you're either going to fulfill that vision or you will not. If you do, you're going to share it with your judge from prison. You're going to share it with your eventual probation officer. We'll talk about that in a moment. And of course, you're going to share it with all stakeholders, including your case manager. Now, someone in our community recently about 6 months ago, went to Montgomery, where we have a very large group. My partner, Michael Santos, is going there soon to make a presentation and speak. And he called from Montgomery very dejected about 6 months ago because he basically said, my case manager took a strategic release plan and like threw it in the shredder, man. Like, why did I spend time creating this? She won't even read it. What the hell are you people telling me to do? One, we don't live our life for a bureaucratic case manager in Montgomery, Alabama, who we hope will read or not read your release plan. We don't live for other people. It's for you and your family. I said, keep building, keep developing, keep growing, keep sharing it. Didn't see her for 6 months when he had his next team meeting, and he went in and gave it to her again, and she actually spent some time to review it. I can't tell you she did an extensive review, please, but she was impressed with the fact that he had been productive. He had built upon it. It's now part of a central file. And I said to him, because he was happy, I said, your happiness is too contingent on what a case manager does or does not do. You got to work on that. Even if she threw it in the shredder again, you still continue to share it with stakeholders like your probation officer, your judge, who can influence getting your passport back and traveling. It won't influence people to the degree that you would like, but that doesn't mean you don't do it. Do what John Gustin, who ran this program for 25 years, said to do. Your own time, build your own plan, build it and grow it. We're 17 minutes in. Are there any questions based on what we've discussed thus far? Anything at all? I don't see any hands. Okay, Scotty Carper, I'm going to come to you. Then I'm going to play a very promotional YouTube short video I filmed in Sun River, Oregon, when I was on the golf course. Before I do that, Scotty, didn't you tell me when you transitioned from prison to the halfway house, they gave you a positive response to what you had done? If the answer is no, say no, I'm going to have to transition. This is only good stuff here. But can you
No, it was really
tell us
good.
what
I had
happened?
I had a tremendous response. I turned in my release plan and he sat down with me and he started looking through it and he said, wow, you kind of did my job for me. I'm going to put you in for home confinement immediately. And I was supposed to spend, I think, 4 months there. But he said, this answers every question I had in terms of, do you have a support group? What are you going to do when you get out? Where are you going to live? It's like, this is basically doing my job for me. Thank you.
So that aligns with what John Gustin said in that short clip. And we're going to go to another clip here in a moment. He said, if you don't write it, they're going to write it. And I can tell you if they write it, let me ask it this way. If you wrote your plea agreement, would it be more factual? That is correct. So if you let them write it, bad things are coming because it's going to be 2 paragraphs and it's not going to do anything that gets you closer to what you want. So for example, I know Brandy's on this call. She's reaching out with respect to a friend of hers is in custody. She may speak with our team. Here's the advice that I'm going to give you to give to your friend. Begin to document, if he hasn't already, what he's done while he's in prison, what he will do moving forward. Begin to share it with stakeholders. It's very, very simple. It's not just I engaged in a program. What did Joseph DiGregorio do? I took a program. This is what I learned from the program. It's not I read a book. Why did you read the book? How was the book helping me become a law-abiding citizen? And how will the book help me moving forward? Then you share it. Probably a good idea then to put it up on Prison Professors Talent. Brandy, your friend, can do that. Prison Professors Talent is free. White Collar Advice sponsors the nonprofit that provides this service. It's an opportunity to document your journey through prison for various stakeholders. Share that link with your case manager. Share it with everyone, as Melinda on our team did. Presuming you want to get out earlier, presuming you want more liberty, and you should begin doing this before sentencing as well, because I know that it can influence judges. John Gustin said, if you don't write it, they will. The onus is on you to do the work, either with our team or do it on your own. Just make sure it's done correctly with the appropriate message and make sure it's realistic. When I say realistic, not every dude is Michael Santos who wants to write thousands of words every single day. I saw it. There are people who have done this work with our team who commit to something. And I say, is that realistic? Do you really want to write 7 times a week? You don't have to. Is 3 more realistic? Don't say you're going to write 5 book reports a month. If you want to write 1, say you're going to do 1 and then do 3. Overdo it, exceed, but don't say something and then not do it, because what happens is you look inauthentic. Also, you should expect, as Michael will discuss here in a moment, to send work and then have people not review it or have no idea if they're even reading it, which leads into the next part of the interview. Bear with me for a while. Okay, here we go. Let's listen to this.
To the CARES Act.
So I'd like to get your take on a couple of things to what you just responded, and to what you just said. I'm going to first of all go back to personal experience. Those who are familiar with the Prison Professors program know I was incarcerated for 9,500 days. And one of the strategies that I used several years before I got out of prison was I would write an unsolicited letter to the chief probation officer in the district where I wanted to start my life. And I didn't know who it was going to. I would just write to the United States Probation Office and in the Northern District of California. And I write, my name is Michael Santos. I've been incarcerated for 22 years. I expect to get out in the next 3 years or so. And I didn't know because I was old law. So I didn't know when I was going to get out specifically, but I could get a range within a year or so. And I said, when I come home, this is the career that I want to build. This is how I've prepared for it. This is the support I have built. This is where I expect to build. These are my financial resources, and laid all of that out. I didn't get a response and I didn't expect a response, but I would keep writing them, first of all, like every quarter, the last couple of years, and then every month as I got closer. And when I went to the probation office, they knew who I was. And I had a great relationship from day one, and it allowed me to work for myself. It allowed me to have domestic rights to travel domestically from day one because they believed in me. I built that relationship over time. What you just said, John, if I would have known that while I was in prison, I probably also would have been writing to the residential reentry manager because that person, I want that person to know me. I want that person to know I'm not just saying what I want to do. Here's who I am. I don't expect them to write me back. But if I got out and my name is, oh, I know that guy, how would that have been an effective strategy?
So I don't think so.
Okay.
I think the strategy that you took and the strategy that I also encourage all the justice involved people, the probation office is very, very powerful in what's going to happen in your reentry journey. They're usually in committees with the RRM office. The RRM office is processing so many referrals for the community. If they get those kind of letters, they're going to put them in the shredder. But what I do encourage you to do is just build that relationship with the probation office. Let them know what your plan is, because you mentioned self-employment. Self-employment is something that's scrutinized very, very heavily in the Bureau of Prisons, especially when you're coming out to an RRC. It's very hard to track. But normally when somebody asks for self-employment, we ask the court, hey, is he going to or she going to be allowed to work at self-employment when they get out on supervision? If the courts come back and say, yes, then that's probably something we're going to allow you to do pre-release while you're still in the halfway house also. But those type of communications and building a rapport, again, I mentioned it earlier, every time you go into a case meeting with your case manager, you should be taking a written plan in there and asking them to incorporate it into your inmate performance plan or your case plan with case manager, because the RRM sees that and they're reviewing it. They're looking to see what your conduct was while you're inside the prison. They're looking to see how did you behave, what programs did you do, all of that. And to show that you've got that written plan and you continue to build on it, and every time you went in to see your case manager, you had a written plan, is really going to help that RRM make really good decisions about, hey, this is somebody who's going to be successful. And I've got one bed open and I've got a year. So do I put somebody who I think is going to be successful and use that program for the better good for 8 months, and then the individual who has poor institutional behavior, lots of incident reports for the other 4, or do I just split it and give each individual 6 months?
So
those are the type of decisions that the RMs are making.
okay, so I mean, there you go, right? There's this presumption. Some people presume they're going to get like 9, 10, 11, 12 months in the halfway house, 7 months in the halfway house. I film these YouTube short videos for a good reason. Some people with the same sentence get 3 months in the halfway house. Another dude gets 7 months and they flip out. You just heard John Gustin say why. Most people tend to be driven by their own self-interest. It's okay to acknowledge that. So a case manager's self-interest is their employment, their trabajo. They don't want to lose it. So they don't want to make a bet on someone they think is going to make them look dumb, who engages in disciplinary infractions, who doesn't program, who isn't worthy of it. That's the dude that may get little to no halfway house time, whereas the person will get the most of the time if they've done the work, if they're a good bet. It's the same reason that judges depart. We've interviewed judges for a reason. Shockingly, some of you still don't follow the advice. That's on you. Federal judges say, I'm more inclined to give a shorter sentence if I'm convinced that person's not going to return to my courtroom. You want to know why? I don't want to look dumb. What have you done to demonstrate why you'll never return to another courtroom and why you're a candidate if there's only so many beds in the halfway house, why you're a candidate to get one of them with maximum time? It probably makes sense to build it and develop it and grow it. Your choice, your life, your case. To that end, as we talk about some practical things, I shared a video. I'll post it here. There's the White Collar Advice YouTube channel. Was it a live video? Perhaps. I tend to do more live videos now with my schedule. I posted a video that I would encourage you to watch. I'll also put it in the replay here. One moment. It's here somewhere. Maybe it was a live video. Anyway, I filmed a video that talked about my first week in the halfway house. And what happened in that first week was kind of like exactly what John Gustin said. I'm trying to find it. I actually brought my release plan to the halfway house, and no joke when I tell you, she actually like threw it in the trash, like right in front of me, the round file. It wasn't cool. I didn't appreciate it. Here we go. My first 7 days in the halfway house. One moment. The last day in federal prison. Okay, so I'm going to put this for everyone to see because you're going to get a sense of the first 7 days when my case manager threw my release plan in the trash. But it didn't matter because my probation officer, Isaiah Murrow, had read everything I had sent him from prison. And that was fully consistent with what Michael just expressed to you and what he taught me to do in prison, sharing that work, my release plan, everything that I had created with my probation officer, Isaiah Murrow. So even though my case manager threw it in the trash, which is why John Gustin advises, don't send it to them, don't send it. Send it to your judge, send it to your probation officer. If you don't know who it is yet, send it to the office, make a copy with the copy card you buy in the commissary, make a copy of it in case it gets lost. Sometimes they may not get it. You bring the handwritten note. You actually bring it with you to the meetings, as I did. When I brought mine to Isaiah Murrow, he said, I already have them. I said, great. So don't be upset. Because of that work, not only did I eventually get permission to work with justice impacted people, I got my job approved in the halfway house really quickly. And is there anyone on here like Andy? How long did it take to get your job approved quickly? And until you don't really feel free, right? Probably till you're working and leaving the halfway house. Would you concur?
Yeah, yeah. The halfway house. As I said, I'm sure all of them are unique. Mine did not have. We couldn't go outside.
Mhm.
If you didn't have a job, you could not go outside unless you had a pass to be going to do something that they approved. And so getting a job was mentally very healthy for me, just to be able to get out and going to work at a garden center in particular was a good match. So yeah.
So I will tell you, without this planning, the halfway house can be miserable.
Yeah.
And that's why so many people kind of wish they were back in prison to finish the sentence in the Cushing minimum security camp. I'm sure you saw, did you hear some dude lamenting like, I wish I was back in the camp?
I had moments where
Yes.
I was wishing, yeah, I mean, really, it's no joke.
So it's not uncommon. I want you to embrace that if you're not prepared properly for it, you too wish you were back in prison, because they're going to require you to work or look for work. The days of COVID where it was easier to justify not working because of COVID are long gone, right? If your job isn't approved, they're going to say to you, at least at the halfway house here in Hollywood and Van Nuys, it's happened also with a halfway house in Illinois. They said, that's cool. You're leaving now. You'll be back by 5. I need to see at least 20 employment applications. So it's like on my phone, I don't care. By the time you get back today, I need to know that you've submitted employment at 20 places. You should be working. So that's when a lot of people are like, damn, I wish I had a job lined up. They're really making it difficult for me. Some halfway houses will actually, like, they'll just say, work here, scrub the toilets and showers. You're not going to get paid because you're living here, but you need to be productive if you're not going to get a job. Listen to what John Gustin said, and then follow people like Scotty and Andy who implemented it. To that end, I'm going to play a YouTube short so you can understand how these things can actually play out. And then I'll give you an update on what's happening with the person who left this message. I was playing 9 holes of golf in Sun River, Oregon. 1 second. Where did you get that idea? The first day in federal prison comes with some challenges. You're in an environment you never thought you'd face. You might be in handcuffs, spend several hours in segregation, do that really nice squat and cough, answer hundreds of questions, and then before you know it, you're over at the camp in a brand new environment, looking at the showers, the toilets, the bunk. Who will your bunkie be? There's so much to take in, but I'm here to tell you it will go quickly. And I think the most important thing you can do that first day in prison is what our client did, because his probation officer said to him at the halfway house in San Francisco,
How'd you get that idea? That first day in prison, our client wrote a letter to the probation officer that said, I just got here. Here are my plans and goals for the next 15 months. Hold me accountable, and I'm going to update you in 60 days with progress. And he sent them from prison, and the PO read every one, and he was impressed. Boom. Take 5 minutes to write a letter to your probation officer that first day in prison and continue doing it. They'll benefit, I promise.
Okay, so
Where did you get that idea?
we know he got the idea because he's someone in our community who did exactly what Michael Santos and John Gustin said he should do. So whether it's your first day in prison or your 30th day in prison, or you're watching this and you have a loved one in prison, Brandy, your friend, if you presuming he's coming home at some point, write a letter to someone that says, this is how I'm going to be productive and law abiding when I come home. And this is how I've been productive while I'm in prison. If you've yet to be sentenced, begin to build that record, share it with the judge, and then continue it. Time is on your side if you haven't been sentenced. And that person in the filthy Tenderloin district in San Francisco, that halfway house, I know well, because that's where Michael Santos, my partner, was for 1 full year. I hate to say it, forgive me, I used to love San Francisco. I used to go there a lot when I was a student at USC. That whole block should be burned down. It's so filthy, sickening, and scary. I hate to say it, you walk along that street, you feel like you're going to catch a disease, like walking through the streets of downtown Los Angeles. That's the reality. So when you get there, you know what he wanted? Get me the F out of here. I wish I was back at Atwater where he finished his sentence in Northern California. You get it. That's probably the worst one next to Missouri. That too should be burned down. So you can embrace it and you can follow his path, because now the dude's working 16 hours a day, not far from Petaluma area-ish. Gets there, has the plan, PO's impressed, all good. About 7 days of kind of like a quasi lockdown in the halfway house. Andy mentioned that too, like you couldn't leave, right? Some of these halfway houses have like a lockdown for 7 days. You're not going anywhere. As soon as that orientation, if you want to call it that, was over, he's out 16 hours a day. He needs overtime. He's getting overtime. And of course, the transition to home confinement will be more quickly. Why? Because the dude took 5 minutes every quarter to share his progress with stakeholders. I mean, come on. It has to have the right message. These are things I really encourage you to do, or more struggle is coming. We have people facing deportation who have been able to avoid the deportation and ICE holds and things of that nature, not just by hiring an immigration lawyer, but why are they a candidate for it? People who have been able to get their licenses back because they're able to demonstrate to a licensing board why they're worthy of it. It's not by what a paid lawyer is going to say. Of course, they should say you should stay in this country. And of course, they should say you should keep your license. What has that person done to prove worthy of it? Because that licensing board, like the case manager, you know what they're concerned about? Their own self-interest. They don't want to give a doctor's license back or let someone stay in this country if there's a chance they're going to continue to break the law. Probably makes sense to show them how you're not going to break the law. That said, 34 minutes in, any questions based on what we've covered thus far? I see a lot of messages coming in. Before I transition, someone says, when do you know who your probation officer, who do you know it will be? It varies. Michael wrote that he didn't know, so he just sent it directly to the main office in like the district he knew he was releasing to Northern California, Petaluma, and San Francisco. He just sent it directly to that office and made a copy. I was fortunate because my sentence was so short. I knew like 3 or 4 months into my federal prison sentence, or about 5 months into my federal prison sentence, when my release date would be. And then the probation office in Woodland Hills, California, visited my mom's home in Calabasas, which is where I was going to be staying for a little while, because I foolishly rented out my home, not knowing anything about Good Time or Halfway House, so I couldn't even return home. The point is, I knew. So my mom said, Isaiah Murrow, here's his card, email address, mailing address. I'm like, awesome. I had a one-way ticket to mailing it directly to Isaiah Murrow. So if you don't know, who cares? Send it directly to the office, make a copy, share it with them. Even if they don't read all of it, they'll see that you've done it. And that is the best way to separate you, in our humble expert opinion. Now, I want to transition for a moment to one more YouTube short before we get back to John Gustin. And I actually filmed this yesterday while my son was playing some basketball. I took a little break because I received a very difficult phone call from a very nice woman who had a tough experience in federal prison. So can you see my screen here? Do you see my screen? Everyone just making sure? Okay, so let's watch this.
Is this normal? Have you ever seen this before? If he thought I was angry then, he should hear my rage right now. Look, there's some obvious things you shouldn't do in prison. Don't gamble, don't use iPhones, wash your hands after using the restroom, don't speak too loudly on the phone. I had that problem. Don't cut in line to go to the chow hall. Don't complain about the length of your sentence. Don't speak to staff anymore than you need to. Some obvious things. There's another thing you shouldn't do, which led to this person calling irate. She drove several hours to visit her husband in federal prison, and when he was paged down to visitation from camp control, there you go. He denied the visit. That's a wrap. I'm not going in. And on the call, I asked, like, what do you discuss in visit? She said, like, here's what I discussed. What are you going to do when you come home? It's awesome you're getting released. What's the plan? And apparently it was easier to deny the visit, so we didn't have to endure those questions. You shut it down. She's furious and irate. It's wonderful to get released from prison. It's even scarier, however, if you don't have a plan. Prove worthy of love, support your family. Work hard every day in prison. Don't make this tragic mistake. Okay. Now, I presume Andy or anyone in prison, Melinda, you probably didn't see people turning down visits. I did. Did you ever see that, Andy, while you were there? Anyone, Scotty, did you see that? Okay. That's pretty severe, but I think we can all attest and agree, Andy and Scotty. It was easier for me. I wasn't married with children, and I did have to hear it from my neurotic mother, who wasn't thrilled that I was in prison. Can we agree that visitation is not all it's cracked up to be? Unless, can anyone offer some insights on, you think it's party time 101, you got 8 hours with family, sometimes after about 30 minutes, you know what you say? That's a wrap. Okay, I'm gonna go walk that track. We got a good show coming on, and it's bingo night. Thank you. Can anyone offer any insights on that? Anyone, please? And I'm going to share why in a moment.
Well, I would just say that getting visits, it is a really healthy, good thing, but it's also emotionally charged, and it's just not a normal situation. So there is a lot of stress, even if it's a positive interaction that you're having. So it's complicated.
I know that what we don't want is this sentence to be any longer than is necessary. And to the extent that you can begin to prepare for it now, our team we've updated the white collar advice side. It's a little leaner, and it's just more focused on what we think defendants should do, whether you work with our team or not. And in this new updated about page, I really discuss this concept that many of you might already know, but something that Michael encouraged me to do was just to begin writing. Just write. He'd say, who cares if somebody doesn't read it? You have the dignity of having tried. So I said, okay, I can do that. So as I wrote, feeling inspired with my new routine, I told Michael I was ready to do more. While walking around that dusty track, he suggested I put my journey online for others to learn from and to hold me accountable. I'm out of phone minutes. When my mom visits on Friday, I will ask her to register justinpaperny.com, which is now White Collar Advice. I will mail her a letter today. 10 days later, with help from Michael, my first blog was up with a commitment to write. And that blog became the harbinger for lessons from prison, which I wouldn't have if I didn't start with this first blog. And there's the actual letter I sent home to my mom. So whether you put it online or you just keep it amongst your friends and family, many people in our community will have a weekly newsletter they'll send out through Core Links. We have someone in our community, they have 300-400 people who will receive that newsletter via Core Links. One, because he doesn't want to communicate with people all day via email in prison, but it's a way for them to hear from him. So similar to how Scotty Carper managed a blog while he was in prison. Another concept that Michael really helped me understand was this concept of reverse engineering, looking to the end and then working your way back with very strategic content. And that's why you have an opportunity to do that through Prison Professor's Talent, which again, costs you nothing, but it's an opportunity to document, build, and release. Most people use their real name. Some people do not. That's fine. Doesn't matter to us as long as you are sharing it with stakeholders. And if you're volunteering with our nonprofit or another nonprofit, you need to build that work into your messaging, because people in our community, like Massimo Giannulli, you might recall from the Varsity Blues case, documented his volunteer work before sentencing, got a good outcome with 250 hours of community service that of course he did through our nonprofits, whether it's with us or elsewhere. Build and document it, or else they're going to believe it truly didn't happen. And that's how these cynical stakeholders feel. If it's not documented, they are going to say it truly didn't happen, which is kind of a shame for all of you that actually do the work and who are willing to invest the time. I would like in a moment to transition to another question from John Gustin. Before I do, are there any questions about what we've discussed thus far? I know we're covering a lot. Anything 40 minutes in? Any questions we haven't addressed? In a question like, my wife is being released to a halfway house tomorrow. That's fantastic. Her release is mid-September. Should we plan for her to stay until they're mid-September? Don't know the length of the sentence or all the details, though I'll say to you, she's probably pretty close to her release date. So if she's at like that 90% mark or 10% or left to go, there's a chance that once she gets there, she could immediately be eligible to pretty soon to go to home confinement. She should have that plan. Employment letters are a very good idea. Some employment letters tend to say that you're going to do too much. They don't approve it. It's kind of odd, but true. They don't want you to have so much responsibility while in the halfway house because they could be calling and checking and visiting the office. So you really want a job. So as your wife transitions to the halfway house, she should have a letter. She should have her release plan. She should have the employment letter should say where she'll be working, who her supervisor will be, how many hours a day is it. If she has things like that, not only will she leave more quickly, she's a better bet to go to home confinement more quickly as well. This is some of the strategic planning that you want to just really put in place right now. Someone asked, can you make a profile for someone that's incarcerated? Sure. You want to let them know, you want them to be involved in the messaging without question. So there's so much that you should consider doing as you're going through this process and really learning to what subject matter experts like a John Gustin says. That said, let me transition to another point that I think is relevant. If you have a problem in the halfway house, which does happen, 1 second. "32 minutes, right? 1 second. The patience as we wait here. 1 second. Problems can pop up, and I will tell you, from my experience, there could be some petty staff in the halfway house. It's kind of uneducated people with a lot of power they have not earned, and they can create some obstacles and they can frustrate you. Just the way it goes. You got to embrace that. But if you've already been to prison, it should be nothing that shakes you at this point.
What steps should the individual take if they want to be self-employed?
Yeah, so I think in anything that happens in the halfway house, we got to remember there's almost 300 halfway houses nationwide. You know, I like to say there's varying degrees of professionalism and there's varying degrees of ability across those halfway houses. By and large, we've got really, really good halfway house providers who really care about helping in the reentry journey. But there's always going to be times when you disagree with what the halfway house staff are saying. And I always encourage people, you know, I have disagreements in my life, you have disagreements in your life. It's how you handle that adversity or how you handle those disagreements that is really going to set the tone moving forward. The Bureau of Prisons, the halfway house staff have incredible discretion in removing you from that halfway house. And disrespect is one of those reasons they can remove you from a halfway house, or at least is going to get you very well singled out that this is somebody we're going to start scrutinizing very carefully. So when you talk to halfway house staff, you have to be very respectful and understanding that some of the individuals working at the halfway house just started and they're very, very young and they're in some ways immature and they're learning, you know, starting in this work and starting in this field. And some of them get on, you know, where they're looking at the power that they have over others. You still have to treat them with respect. And then you respectfully go up their chain of command. You know, you have a security staff at the halfway house. You then have your case manager. You then have a supervisor and you have the program director. But always, and in every halfway house, it's a requirement of the Bureau of Prisons that they have the representative names and contact numbers for the Bureau of Prisons who directly over that halfway house. And at least in my experience and in the staff I've talked to, which is a great number over the years, when you call the Residential Reentry Management Office and you get a staff member on the phone, when you say, I'd like to discuss something that I observed at the halfway house that may have impacted me personally, and I'd like to talk through this situation, and see if there's a way that maybe I could have handled it better or the staff could have handled it better. I'm now taking an approach where I'm not calling and saying, hey, the halfway house screwed this up and I deserve or I need this. No, I'm taking an approach where, hey, this has happened. I'm concerned about it. It has impacted me professionally, but can we work together to resolve the situation that's going to better the halfway house and going to better the programming for anybody that comes in behind you? And when you take that type of an approach, it's really, really positive. And I'll tell you that it's positive throughout your period of incarceration, no matter if you're at the halfway house or, but so many people at the halfway house get into this mode where they don't think they're incarcerated anymore. They start to get this small taste of freedom and they're very stressed out. I have yet to meet somebody who's at a halfway house who's very relaxed and, you know, you're getting all of this stuff thrown at you at one time. Go find a job, find a place to live, reintegrate with your family, start developing your family ties again. Well, if you've been incarcerated for any period of time, that's a stressful time. So understand that you're dealing with this stress and you're dealing with all these other things, and step back and relax and approach people, again, respectful, approach people the way you'd want to be approached and have these calm discussions. You're going to have so much more success in the programs. Even as the administrator for the branch, I would get letters in and individuals would write me and I'd read these and I said, well, this is stupid. Why didn't they let him do this? Well, because everybody got up in their feelings and now it's a power thing. I'm going to show you that you're still incarcerated and you're not able to do this. Even though I'm going to allow 5 other people to do the exact same thing, the way you approach me in that, put me on the defensive and I'm not going to let you do it. Because your circumstances are different and that's going to be the response. Well, we consider everything on an individual basis and your circumstances are different than theirs. So that's probably the biggest thing.
Okay, so he said something that the power trip, so to speak, you're going to see a lot of that there. But I can tell you, there is a higher level of pettiness in the halfway house than you will ever see in prison. In the lower security you go, the more things they're going to be concerned about, right? Like in a penitentiary, they're probably concerned about killings and violence. I mean, you're in the penitentiary. In the low, it could be gang affiliations. When you get to the camp, okay, there's still stuff they're worried about, iPhones and whatnot, some people escaping. But when you get to the camp, there's not as much stuff taking place. So they're going to pay more attention to things. But I know a guy, sometimes they'll randomly call you back for like a drug test just to inconvenience you, right? They'll call you and say, we need you back here in an hour to take a drug test. And you just do it. But one guy walks in, he's like, this is the 3rd time in a week. That's a wrap. They've shut down, his passes for the next 2 weeks. Why? Just because they can. Because he said 3 times in a week, he forgot, and as John just said, that he was still incarcerated. So you have your clothes on, you may have your iPhone, you go to work, you're still confined. It is quasi-freedom in every sense of the word. And if you fail to embrace that, then you're failing to embrace reality. So I think a part of the reason I was successful in prison, or at least in the halfway house, I didn't really care. I didn't care if they didn't send me to home confinement more quickly. I didn't care if they didn't approve my job, even though I wanted it approved, because I knew that I'd already been through indictments and guilty pleas and sentencing and reputation and loss and money and prison and shame. I mean, you get to that point, you're like, it's all good, man. At least it was that way for me. But some guys really freak out, really go rogue, and they get off on it. And just to be very honest with you, it's great. They're looking for that level of frustration so they can continue to make it even more difficult for you. So to the extent that you could be, I think, more stoic, non-responsive, the irony is you actually get more of what you want. That was the experience that I saw inside of the halfway house. I also saw a lot of people get sent back to prison in the halfway house for violating. Andy, did you see any of that? I think we might have lost Andy. Scotty, did you see any people get violated in the halfway house and go back? Can you just touch on that? I mean, hardly a day passed without seeing the marshal show up to arrest.
Oh, I saw probably 15 or 16 people get sent away by the marshals, including one of my roommates.
Very nice, Scotty. Very nice,
Thank
Terry. Who are you associating with? Okay, so here's what happens, okay? In those instances, you're not necessarily going back to a camp because your sentence could be short. Can someone guess? This is Jeopardy. Can someone guess where they finished their sentence? We're doing Jeopardy here, people. I'm looking for an answer. What is it? The answer to the question. If you get arrested, picked up again in the halfway house, and they take you back to custody, where do you think you're finishing your sentence if you have 30 days left?
A detention center.
That is correct. So you're not even going back to like the cushy minimum security camp to finish the sentence. Where I was in Los Angeles, they take you straight to Metropolitan Detention Center, which is like, it's not the cushy camp. So you should recognize how they will send you back to prison. If you say you're going to the DMV and for your pass and you don't go to the DMV, they will send you back to prison if you say that you are Ubering to go to the DMV or to go to the doctor, but so-and-so picks you up and you go to a motel or you go hang out with some of your boys for a few hours, you're going back. So it really does require discipline and resolve because they're watching. And I know where I was in the halfway house, they would kind of follow you out. They would track you a little bit. Sometimes they would test to confirm that you were there. One person, especially when I came home, iPhones were big. Take a photo to confirm you were at the DMV and bring it back the photo, like snapping a photo that I'm here. Okay. These are things I want you to prepare for. This is what we're talking about today, people. Okay. We're at 153. I saw someone who says they owe 562 in restitution. I owed 535. I paid it. If I can, so can you. Take some time. We can discuss restitution in another webinar, but here's the best advice I can ever give you about restitution. Never miss a payment. Okay. Because if you do, these algorithms are going to pop up and then boom, you're going to get a thing for updated financials. I know someone in our community that thought it would be a good idea once he was off probation to skip a payment. $200 a month, financials $2,000 a month. Have a nice day. If you're off the radar, doing what you're supposed to do, stay off the radar. Don't miss a payment. If you do, they have these algorithms that just pounce. But that's another thing we can discuss. Okay. Anything we haven't covered thus far? Any questions about halfway house, home confinement, restitution? So happy to hear someone say they had a wonderful visit with their partner in Yankton. Love hearing that. It's a good prison, relatively speaking, standalone prison. Release plan, this and that. So is the release plan a living document or should you only turn in the final version? Scotty and Melinda gave the right answer. It's a living dynamic document that grows as you grow. We have someone getting sentenced next week. They wrote their first narrative like 6 months ago for the probation officer. And the end of the narrative said, I'm going to continue to make progress and follow this plan. And they did. And since then, they went through our Preparing for Success After Prison course. It's 10, 15,000 words. They began to volunteer. And now what do? You update the narrative like you would update a release plan because they've made progress in their life. It is a living, breathing document. So now the judge is going to be able to see this dude at the probation officer wrote this letter, which is impressive alone, shows that you took the time to write it. We have confirmation of that from a judge. Then he actually had to write it or update it again because of the progress that he had made. Pretty good stuff, I think. Then he's going to get sentenced until the judge is going to do something. Then he's actually going to do it. And if he does, he'll update it again as well. So like my little journal here in my office that hangs in my office right behind me, it started with one blog, one little journal. The first thing I wrote in there was how many miles I ran that day. Like who gives a rat's ass how much I ran, but it felt good to write. Then the journal was very helpful for me. And the journal became a blog and the blog then became a book and the blog and book became a brand that has helped thousands of people traversing the system, also helping fund a nonprofit where we give as much away as we can for free, because I know every day several people schedule calls. Most would love to hire us. Some can, some cannot because they don't have the resources. That's why I do this for free to help as much as we can. And if any of you have scheduled a call with our team, I always say the same thing. Here's my urgency or sales pitch. Work with our team on the right message, or if you can do it on your own with the right message, do it. But you're already late. And that's how I'll wrap up this webinar, I think, with something that was said to me by my very good friend, Paul Bertrand, the FBI agent that arrested me a long time ago. Paul's my buddy. I always say they're good dudes unless they're arresting you. A little updated on the web, some writing on the website, if I'm on the right page here. I think it's here. Hardly a day passes without a defendant thinking, it's early, I have time, right? It wasn't too late for the government to indict you, for banks to fire you, for the government to prepare for trial and issue press releases, or for you to hire a lawyer. As you read, some government bureaucrat, I've got a damn typo here, I'll fix that, are working on your case with unlimited resources, our tax dollars. And somewhere in here, there's Joseph. I'll close with that. Somewhere in here, I mentioned what Paul Bertrand said to me. Here he is. He said this in a YouTube video I did with him. Paul Bertrand told me, when we show up at a defendant's home for a raid or send a target letter, we are in the bottom of the 8th inning. The work is done. What matters is what the defendant does next to mitigate. Despite this urgency, many defendants embrace the status quo or convince themselves they have time. Most never get around to truly preparing. So, as I close, presuming there's no questions, I will promote Joseph, who is a client of ours. And of course, if you've worked with our team, you know he's our lead consultant. This is a little more salesy because Joseph's on our team and we share it. All of you should be creating your timeline for stakeholders. Day you got arrested, got a target letter, hired lawyers, begin to mitigate, begin to volunteer, begin to build. Some of you will do it, some will not. Accept the plea deal, continue to mitigate, share, get letters. Joseph created the release plan before sentencing. He did everything right, but that's what he said when he called. Do everything you tell me to do. I don't want to go to prison for any longer than I have to. Part of the reason they ask for 41 to 51 months in prison, he gets a year and a day and he's released after 4 months. It's not make-believe. It's not like, oh, did it really happen? Here it is. It's all documented. There's evidence behind it. I would be like Joseph and try to get to low intensity caseload on probation as quickly as you can. Also easier if you have a shorter federal prison sentence. That's what I would be doing. Whether we do it with you or you say, I got it. Awesome. Just do it. Some of you will, some of you will not. That said, we're 2 p.m. I see Christina raising her hand. Is that a hand up? Talk to me. Unmute yourself. So
I just had a question,
Yes.
as far as, how they determine which halfway house that you go to. My husband is serving his sentence out of state, so would they bring him back here for halfway house?
So they should release him to the halfway house closest to his release address. So they'll ask, and that should be in his release plan, of course, his release address. They'll visit the home to confirm there's an actual location. There's this probation officer who told me one time someone put they had an address, but it was like under a freeway. So they're going to confirm the address, but it should be the release address closest to your home. Now,
Okay.
there are instances where availability isn't there. Like Scotty lives in Northern California, but like the closest halfway house was several hundred miles away. That was a whole shtick. But we have someone right now in they live in Connecticut, but the halfway house in Greenwich is full. And the halfway house actually that prison gave him a chance. Do you want to go to Brooklyn or a halfway house in New York? You're not going to go to the one in Connecticut. That was kind of cool. They did that. It's a longer drive, but of course he's like, yeah, I want to get the hell out of here. Okay. So that is, they should send him to the one closest to his release address. Okay.
Okay.
Sometimes it's full, usually not, but sometimes how much halfway house time you get could actually be contingent on is there space. But like I said, sometimes they'll give an option. I know where I am in Los Angeles, they've given 2 options. There's one in Van Nuys and one in Hollywood, about 30 minutes away. Both, and sometimes depending on the offense, you may, like some halfway houses don't accept certain sorts of crimes and whatnot. But generally speaking, he should know by now where he's going or have an idea, and he should be sharing that release plan with stakeholders and just really building it. And they'll come to the home eventually and speak with you as well.
Okay. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. It's 2 o'clock. We're going to wrap up now. Carrie, do I see your hand raised?
Yes, sir. I was just wondering how I can obtain, if possible, Joseph's timeline, and thank you for everything.
No, it's my pleasure. Joseph's timeline is on I'll send it when I send the replay of this on the White Collar Advice site under the pre-sentence landing page. By the way, this would be a very good read for you if you want to listen to the New York Times podcast on our company. It's about 45 minutes, how 2 people in our community got the best possible outcome, including one avoiding prison. On this page, you'll see a link to Joseph's timeline right here. I'll put this up, but also when I send out this replay, I will include the timeline. I was in Oregon last week, so I missed the replay, but I will You have my word. I will get them up. I will,
Thank you.
I will get this one up, okay? Okay, great. Really exciting. Thanks for letting me do all the talking and relay on Michael and John and my team to convey some important information. With that said, it's 2:00. My little boy starts school tomorrow, which means I'm going back on daddy duty for about 2 hours till I switch with my wife. I've enjoyed our time together. I'll see you next Monday. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.